You can't gain muscle in a deficit. You can't lose fat and build muscle at the same time. You can't stop falling for dumb takes online. My sister's baking every single day. She's making these amazing brownies, these amazing cookies, these amazing cakes, and I'm just gobbling it and gobbling it down. But, you know, I have a certain calories to make, so what do? I take a little bit less of the other stuff. I have a little bit less in the meals, and I'm not even really controlling my meals. I'm still having the stuff my mum makes. So I go to dinner, I look at what she's made, and I go, oof, how can I fit this in? And of course I can't fit it in. Like, not only are the proportions all off, but it's not very easy to do when there's not much protein in a meal, because it's a mother's meal. That's what a mother's meal is like. And so I'm going to the gym, I'm getting my reps in, but I'm getting less reps. And, I believe it's normal. I believe my strength should be going down in the cut, and I'm losing muscle, I'm losing strength, and I'm just thinking that's normal. And the thing is, this is 2 years in. I should actually be gaining muscle, gaining strength in a deficit. I am not advanced enough to not do that. And yet I was losing. And attached to this, I completely believe that this is normal. This is what I expect people to happen. This is what I expect to happen when you lose body fat, you lose muscle, you lose strength. It's as if it's like a common understood fact when it's really not the case for someone who's new. If there's one takeaway I really want you to take from this, before we get into talking about a deficit really, it's the fact that if you're too lean, bulk, if you're too fat, cut. And if you're somewhere in between where you don't really know which way to go, ask yourself the question, do I need to cut? If there is no response, your mind's like, if you have to think about it for even a second, it means you're not fat enough. Anyone who actually needs to cut knows they need to cut, okay? Now, off the bat, there's a few ways we can actually gain muscle in a deficit. The first is when someone is completely new to strength training. They could have done cardio, they could have done, American football, they could have done so many things where you're actually exercising and, doing cardio and being healthy, but unless they have done strength training before, it doesn't matter. Like, they will still hit the gym, they will still gain a ton of muscle, a ton of strength very, very quickly because they are literally detrained. The second is someone who has lots of body fat. If you take an obese guy who is 300 pounds and he's 50% body fat and he starts cutting and exercising, yeah, he's going to build a ton of muscle, he's going to build a ton of strength along the way down. And the last is something like underdeveloped body parts. Are you telling me that if you hadn't trained carbs your entire life, and then 10 years in, you start hitting them, that you would not make muscle gain even if you were cutting? That's absurd. If you have never ever hit a body part before, if you have a very weak one, if you've just been training wrong for a large amount of time, like, look at me. The second I started using straps properly, because I was using them incorrectly for years, the second I do that, even though I'm cutting, my strength is getting way too high. My muscle is getting so high. We go to this like Japanese restaurant next to the gym, right? And we're eating and we're eating and we're eating these amazing things. I literally remember it's some of the best food I've had in my life. They had this like fish salad, and it was like 2 different fishes, some sauces and some lettuce, but it was honestly the most delectable thing I've had in my life. And we also had, those amazing chicken katsu. There were so many things that were absolutely incredible. But for one of my friends, this was the only meal he had. Like, he would have 1 meal a day, and he'd get a lot of protein, he'd get a lot of fat, he'd get some carbs in, but that was it. That was his way of cutting. I don't necessarily agree with the method, but I do think, that's, I'm happy you're doing it, basically. I'm happy that you're taking this challenge, because it is a challenge, and it's very, very difficult to do, and something like that, is going to be easy. And plus, he was quite new to the gym, so it means it's not going to interrupt his strength gains. And did it? No. He got so strong, he got so muscular. Every single week I saw him, he was becoming an entirely different person. Let's say we took like a time span of 5 months. If I looked at the guy at the beginning and the end, they didn't even look the same. They were 2 different guys. It was so incredible. And yet for me, 5 months into the gym, I didn't feel like a new person. Now, this could be due to poor training. Although back then when I was coaching my friend, I did not know everything I know now. Like, I knew a little bit. I knew more than I started, but there's still like a 1-2 year gap of knowledge in between me now and me then. And this was probably body dysmorphia, right? Like, I probably just couldn't notice the changes. I'd seen it incrementally day by day by day by day, and I just didn't know what was going on. You might believe that you didn't change, right? Your diet wasn't dialed in, your training wasn't dialed in, that you were just going in and going through the motions. But I want you to go and check your before and after images to just compare, because I promise you there'll be differences. Not even just differences in your physique, but on your face, whether that be your skin complexion, your like acne probability or whatever, or just your smile, you're gonna look different. I actually made an incredible video about this a while back. I think it was one of my first videos. It was basically about dead hangs and how that made me realize that I'd completely changed. If you want to give that a watch, it will be in one of the corners. Now, the meat and potatoes, right? How do you actually train properly in a deficit to build muscle, to build strength? There's a few things we're going to go over. The first thing is rest. If I'm looking to decide, it's just because I'm reading the name of the study, because it's quite difficult to read. But essentially, we have this study here. Again, this is probably a subpar way to do it. I probably should have a different sort of thing. I don't know. I'm very new to using like a computer and a phone. But anyway, we have this study, the longer interset rest periods enhance muscle strength and muscle hypertrophy. I think that's the end of it. It's cut off for me. But this study, if you look at this chart that I've thrown up on the screen, we literally have long rest is going up like, what is this, 4.2 to 4.5. That's about that's about 200 grams, right, across this distance, which I think was 12 weeks. And then in the short rest, we've literally, they're only going up 10, not 10, 100. So that's double the growth. Let's take the 1 rep max bench press. That went up by 12 kilograms. And if we take a look at the short rest, only 4 kilograms. Like, this is a very, very serious thing. You need to have your rests 3 minutes minimum. And sometimes with really heavy hitting things like not leg extensions, like leg press, squats, deadlifts, RDLs, going up to 5 minutes might be necessary. Like, if you're not rest, you're not going to be able to actually properly recruit your muscles. Like, they are way too fatigued to actually do what they're trying to do. The next thing we have is a volume study. And this is kind of, well, it's not actually a volume study itself. It's demonstrating a principle. And the principle is based on the idea that you have a maximum amount of volume that really matters in a week. And at the same time, you have your fatigue building up. And there is like a crossroads where they meet. And if you exceed it, you get more fatigue. And the stimulus is actually worse because of that fatigue. So you have to like balance between your sets because you don't actually need to do many. And so we take a look at this. When we get to about 6 to 8, it literally starts to decrease in effectiveness. So that's typically where you'd want to stop, Anywhere between 5 and 15 is normally a good range. And you're trying to stick to around 5 to 10. But, for some people, maybe going up to that 15 is necessary. Although I really think it's unlikely, of course. Always start lower and expect that you're going to respond better. And then if you really need to, over the years, you can dial it up, you can test it. But for now, we don't have to be that serious. And then we have this intensity study. This is exploring the dose-response relationship between estimated resistance training, proximity to failure, strength gain, and muscle hypertrophy, a series of meta-regressions. This is a preprint, which means it's not actually properly out yet, but it's still something we can use as a valuable source of information. And even if we don't trust it as like scientific fact, we can have a look into it and work out the reasons behind what they're saying. And we can use our own interpretation and understand the way they're handling this data to work out if we're going to agree with it or not before it gets properly peer-reviewed and published. But if we look at this chart, and this is a chart I've shown a few times, we can literally see that the closer to failure it is, the more gains that we get. And this is absolutely insane because it just means that taking these sets to failure, having appropriate volume and having appropriate rest will make sure that you're continuing to build muscle. And not only effectively through your bulk, but effectively through your carb maintenance, whatever you do. This is, the important principles that matter. And we can even take a look at, like, say we were taking a look at the actual studies involved, because there have been a few meta-analyses on volume, right? Not volume, proximity to failure, intensity. And they'll always say that there's no statistical significance. But the thing about statistical significance is it's just an arbitrary number. If we can take a look and consistently, time and time again, every single study closer to failure is resulting in a higher amount of muscle gain, even if it's not significant. Those are those like small amount of gains we're actually fighting for. And anyone who will tell you it doesn't matter is just lying to you because they don't understand the fact that significance isn't always everything. Like, it's a bit absurd, if that makes sense. Like, when you get to the athlete level, you're literally min-maxing. Every little thing matters. Like, these guys in the Olympics, the amount of things they do for a 0.0001% increase, and this isn't even that. This is like an exponential increase in results. I mean, it's pretty absurd. My sessions used to be pretty awful. Not only was I doing a ton of junk volume, like I was literally doing about 30 to 60 sets per workout, but my rests themselves were like 60 seconds. And I would literally count over and over again, all the way up to 60, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way up to 60. And then I would hit the set and I'd be tired. I wouldn't really push hard. There was zero intensity. And I'd just go again and again and again and again, just going through the motions, just moving the weight, not really enjoying, not really progressing, not really achieving. And these were like 2-hour sessions. So I was giving up a lot of my day, and I gave up a lot of months not really doing things properly. That is not easy to say, because I can look back and I can know that I might be where I am now in like 1.5 years if I just started better. You might choose to believe that these things don't matter. You might choose to believe that the actual effective reps isn't what caused growth. This is just not true. These studies are at the top of the evidence hierarchical period, which means anything below it which you might be trying to throw in and explain how it makes a difference or it's important, or there's one random study with like 2 people gave an outcome. That's, those studies are involved in these meta-analyses. They take every single study involved in intensity, everyone involved into volume, everyone involved into sets, and they have a look at it and they find out what is going on. And so for you to come in and say that this other random study had a different outcome and we can just argue with studies, it's not, we can argue with studies. It's not like they're 2 conflicting ones. One is literally above yours, one is it's superior, and you cannot rebut it with something which is really, really low, unless we're talking about interpretation, which is never the case. We're always talking about outcomes. And a lot of these people who are actually arguing studies with you, even the guys online, they're just reading the abstract, which a lot of the times doesn't even tell you anything. I've seen abstracts which give an entirely different conclusion to the actual conclusion itself. So you gotta know who to trust. You gotta follow people who are actually telling you the right stuff. But in the end, look, go down, check if I'm wrong, read the studies. If you really want to complain about that, literally, I've spent hours reading these studies, so you can go read them too. You can see if your conclusion is different. People have accused me of misinterpreting studies, and they don't even read the study. They just take like a small snippet buzzword. But you can do that if you really like to, or you can trust me, and I'd recommend you just trust me instead. But there's always that option, You can never say that I'm lying to you, because you can always go look. So I actually want you to open up your strong, and I want you to implement these changes if you haven't done so already. There's a few things we can do. We can set an auto rest timer on our actual exercises by clicking on the dots on the exercise and then adding auto rest. We can make sure that we're always approaching failure by, I like to annotate the sets instead of 1, 2, 3. I actually annotate with an F to show I failed. And then I will always literally take the set to failure. And if I don't within like my desired rep range, I will always increase it. But because I'm at a place now where I know the weights I'm supposed to be using, even if I go above my desired rep range, which is typically 5 to 10, I will keep going until I reach failure, because I know that I'm building a ton of fatigue and I might as well get a good stimulus, even if it means pumping out 1, 2, 3 more reps. And then when it comes to sets, make sure that your sets are actually fitting that sort of model I showed you earlier. You don't want to be going excessive on that. Now, body recomposition. What actually is body recomposition? So it's the idea that you can build fat, you can build muscle and lose fat at the same time. And it's been kind of clowned upon for a long, long time. And I believe the reason for this is because it's inefficient. Of course, if we want to really take growth to the next level, we're going to do bulk cut cycles, and we're going to get a ton of muscle, we're going to lose a ton of fat, we're going to make sure that we're continuously going through that, and we're not just spending years and years and years to get a really small amount of muscle. Now, this is where kind of Coach Greg comes in, and he talks about mean gaining. And you also have people like Sam Sulek talking about how you can't gain muscle in a deficit, you can't build fat and build muscle, you know what I'm saying. You can't do it. A lot of the time, people are left very confused with these different opinions. They don't really know who to believe. We even have, I believe Mike Mensa said that only bodybuilders cut and bulk because those guys are on steroids. He literally said that the reason they bulk is because steroids increases their hunger and they eat more, and that normal people don't need to do it. Like some absolutely ridiculous things coming from him. I agree with a lot of Mensa's beginning thoughts, but I don't believe with too many. It's not good. So we actually have this study analyzing body recomposition, and it's very, very interesting. Let me just go over a few things. And again, if I look to the side, I'm just reading it. So first we have studies about less experience, meaning that it's easier to recomp, which is obviously, a given. And we have this through Alcaraz, Colquhoun, Wilburn, and Campbell. Then we have people who actually have 3 years plus of training experience. And these guys still have the possibility of recomp, but it's a bit smaller. And this is through like you, Antonio, Cribb, Horn, and Kripe. I don't know. And then we have people with 10 years plus training experience, and they still have the possibility of recomposition, although it's a bit smaller. And we can see that Antonio, Slater, and Rauch. And then we have a little bit of a different thing. This is typically going to be done upwards of 12% body fat. And you could have the question of, oh, that doesn't matter because, we're not lean enough for it to make a difference. We're still in that scenario you mentioned earlier of having too much body fat. But then let's take a look at actual composition, not composition. Let's take a look at competition prep, because that's where those numbers are obviously going to be a bit more, not exaggerated, but interesting. And so if we take a look at comp prep, where, there's a couple guys who were too lean. Well, there's one guy too lean. Well, obviously going to be too lean, but hormones are all whack. You're losing muscle. And this is because this one guy did too much HIIT. And this is Kistler. Well, the Kistler study. Now we have a couple female comps, right? And they actually increased FFMA during that prep, which means they increased muscle mass. That is insane. So we have this through Patrizzo, 8 years of experience, and they gained 0.7 kilograms of muscle in a deficit, whilst decreasing 8 kilos of fat mass. That is not a small amount of fat. Then we have Rorig, 5 years of experience. FFMA increased by 1.3 kilos. Fat mass decreased by 11.4. That is a really big amount of, that's a huge change. We're talking about, most guys when they bulk aren't gaining that much in 2 months. And they're not only losing 12 kilos, but they're gaining that in their deficit. And these are all natural people, by the way. I should have mentioned that before. And then we have a female comp, the last one in this article, this study, and she actually maintained her FFMA during prep. And this is Halliday. And the thing there is, it doesn't show anything significant. They didn't build muscle, but maintaining it is pretty significant as well. And so I never really agreed with Coach Greg when I was younger. And this wasn't because I felt that it wasn't going to work. It was purely because of that thing where it's just not efficient. But yeah, going down to comp levels, it does seem like it can be done. But the reason this hasn't happened to you, the reason it hasn't happened to people around you, is due to poor training and nutrition. If this is the case, then you have to actually take a look at yourself and really work out the reasons why, instead of having some sort of cope to get through the hardship. It again comes down to just read the study. And if you have any sort of counter argument in the comments, if you've actually read it and you have a point to bring up, please let me know, because I would, of course I'm going to respond to that. Of course I'm going to have a look at what you have to say and work out what's going on in people's minds, how I can help bring them back to the side of actual science and reasoning. So I've actually just got back from the gym, and originally I wasn't going to do anything more. The video was going to end there. That was the conclusion. But then I realized that it was actually lacking a bit of something. I talked a lot, but I could have given a bit more. I could have actually helped with the practicality and the implementation. As I said, I've been to the gym. I could help people add in nutrition. That's just as important as the actual training principles. So I'm going to do that now, even though I'm a little bit sweaty. I'm going to do it. It deserves to be said. One of the first things we got to do is we got to keep protein high. Now, I think a really good thing to go with if you have the budget is about 1 gram per pound of body weight. Now, yeah, outliers do exist, and we'll actually get into that in a second, but that amount of protein should be adequate for keeping your muscle and also potentially building it when you're in that deficit. Now, I want to take a look at another study. I was digging in my toolbox because I wanted to bring out something we could talk about here to really consider optimizing something. And this is a high protein diet, 3.4 grams per kilo per day, combined with a heavy resistance training program, improves body composition in healthy trained men and women, a follow-up investigation. And essentially, this included a protein overfeeding study. And what it ended up finding out was that even when you're eating the calorie surplus, now we could say this is because of maybe the thermic effect, the fact that burning a calorie from protein isn't the same as burning a calorie from something else. In order to make that usable energy, it's very inefficient, and so the body kind of struggles to do it, and that's why a protein calorie isn't the same as a normal calorie. But it might not just be that. It might be the fact that, yeah, if you consume more protein, your body composition is better. Maybe you retain muscle better, you build muscle better, whatever it may be, and even then, there are outliers. You may be an outlier. And this isn't to say that you should definitely do it, you should definitely eat a ton, but if the option is available and you have the money, why not? See, the thing is, when it comes to cutting or trying to fit this in, it's fine. We can decrease carbs slightly. We can make sure that we have a way to fit it in. And protein's very satiating. It's very filling. And the fact that a protein calorie isn't the same as a different calorie, even though it does say 4 on the thing, it's fine. It's fine. Because so long as we have a consistent amount of weight loss, that's all that really matters. But for most people, I do like to still recommend that 0.7 grams per pound of body weight, or usually what I would actually recommend is a gram per pound of lean body mass, but that's a bit harder to calculate. So 0.7 is probably where you're going to really maximize that, unless you're an outlier. Again, it just comes to how big is your budget, what do you want to try, really. That's not it though. We know we've got a little bit more. We have the macros, and 100% dialing this in is not only going to guarantee that we're able to build muscle in that deficit and also preserve all the muscle mass as possible, but it's also making sure that we're satiated. You see, I used to drink a ton of diet soda, and it was like my coke, right? It was my way of surviving in the cut because I was so hungry. And then I dialed in my macros just a little bit more. I got them to 100%, and the second I did that, I was just not hungry. My meals could be really tiny and I'd be stuffed. My appetite would just shrink because I'm getting everything I need and I don't need anything more. And yeah, I know I could have still gone to like an all-you-can-eat buffet and absolutely stuffed my face, but it's the fact that I didn't have the hunger cravings. And that's a big thing that will actually stop you in your progress. I have an entire diet video on this, and I'll probably have it as the end card, but that's something you can check out later. That is the easiest thing ever. All you gotta do is you gotta get 1 gram per kilo of lean body mass. That's all you need. If you don't get enough fat, your hormones are gonna be awfully tanked when you get down there. It becomes a little bit more important than carbs, in honesty, because you can live without carbs for a bit. I'm not saying go carnivore, go keto. I think you should be at the same time having as many carbs as possible, but you got to have at least your minimum amount of fat, and that's what the number is. So I wouldn't go above it. It's a bit expensive when it comes to a caloric standpoint, so make sure you're filling the carbs with that instead, but still get the amount of fat you need. And I want to reiterate, anyone who says that carnivore diet is the best, no, it's rubbish. You're actually killing yourself if you do that diet. You can literally watch my video on it. It's so bad. I probably will make a few more dismantles in the future, just in case it becomes a trend again, because it is horrific. It does not work. It only leads to miserableness and unhappiness. So yeah, if you're doing carnivore, please actually cut that out entirely. If you are too lazy to stay for the end card, literally go on YouTube and type in full nutrition guide, pool fitness, and I'll probably pop up. You definitely need to reprogram your diet. The thing is, there's a lot of misinformation in the industry when it comes to diet. There'll be people trying to peddle these interesting sort of ways where you're restricting, you're looking a bit cool. That's what carnivore is. We're cutting out all the poisons in the plants, right? Which, there's not really any poisons. The most thing they talk about is lectins, and the fact of the matter is, when you cook, a majority of the lectins are destroyed, like completely destroyed. And the lectins themselves are only really dangerous if you're like a tiny little ant or something. You don't have to really worry about that unless you're an ant in disguise. And I mean, maybe some ants are watching the video. I get a few views, so it could be the ants nation. They're out there for me. But that actually reminds me, when I used to play this game called Minecraft, there was a server called Hypixel. I know I'm being very illiteral, but like, people aren't here from like a Minecraft channel, it's a fitness channel. And so they had something called guilds, and there was a YouTuber who had like 3.4 million subscribers, but he completely died, and his name was Venom. And he happened to be in my guild, and it was like me and 5 other guys, and I had no idea how he was there, but it was something I used to brag. Like, it was really, really sad, but I would just brag about the fact that Venom's in my guild to just people in game, I guess. But that was back to the important stuff, right? As I said, I've been to the gym. I get quite energetic. I get energetic because I'm tired, and it's like an overcompensation. I want you to like unsubscribe from anyone who's teaching you BS diets, and maybe not just that, but you can keep watching them, I guess, but take their advice with a grain of salt. After you notice the fact that they're trying to push you keto, they're trying to push you carnivore, they're trying to push you, I don't know, removing berries or something, because it's not all it's kicked up to be, if that's a saying. And the overall thing for this video, right, is overall takeaway. I don't want you to feel like you can't build muscle in a deficit. I've seen people who will avoid deficits like it's a plague because they think they're going to lose muscle, they're going to lose strength. And in reality, if you do everything right, you're going to maintain it. But not even that, you could be building some muscle. And that's really, really cool, actually. The reason we do a deficit is we're making ourselves healthier. We're going down to that level where we're trying to, in honesty, prevent diabetes and obesity. And I say obesity in like the actual, the kind of fat percentage instead of like a weight, because obviously we're trying to get obese on the BMI scale. But that's the point. We're trying to get healthier. That's why we're cutting. We're not doing it for any other reasons. And a lot of people avoid it because, they don't want to lose their muscle, which is understandable. But sometimes you have to take something for your health. And if we're not losing muscle and we can gain it, then it's not like we're wasting all this time. In fact, if you don't want to waste time, I do have a video on aggressive cutting, which basically cuts down like a 4-month cut into a 1-month cut, or potentially a bit shorter. definitely go give that a watch, because that could be super useful for someone like you. And at the end of the day, I'm gonna give you one video to watch, and that is the masochist split. I've recently put together the masochist split. I think it's one of the best things out there right now for actually building muscle. It's very efficient, and it will cause you a lot of pain, but it'll be good for you.